Hey, good evening and welcome to the Templeton Community Service District's Board of Directors meeting. Today is Tuesday, May 17th, 2022. And we'll proceed with a roll call, please.
Directors English,
Present.
Cardonish,
Here.
Gardini,
Here.
Logan,
Here.
and Peterson.
Here.
Okay, if you will, please join me. Pledge of allegiance. And those on the phone, if you will, please mute your phone. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And I don't think we need to change any order of business this evening, since we have simply just the consent agenda, and then we'll be moving into closed session. So with that, I believe we have Lieutenant Stewart here this evening from CHP, who will provide us with an update.
Yes, you do. Good evening. Good to be with you in person for a change. Exciting.
Don't recognize you with clothes on.
Wait a minute, that doesn't sound like Wayne. Without a uniform, without his uniform.
Okay.
I was just over at the high school. We had the closing banquet for the boys volleyball team. So I was over there. I coached there this year, and that was a lot of fun. I didn't know, do you show up here in civilian clothes or do you go over there in your uniform? I figured it was probably more appropriate to dress like this over there. I'll try to make a uniform appearance though. With the fire chief here. So this is our report for the month, and I also brought some information related to the crashes that was brought up by Director English in the last meeting, as I recall. So the Templeton CHP area report for the month of April. These are crashes and statistical information for the area in and around about the Templeton. For the total crashes investigated for the period, there were 22. That's up over 20 the prior year. 7 of those occurred on county roads, 17 of those up on the freeway. During the same period, 13 of those were property damage collisions, 5 were injury collisions, 5 involved DUI drivers, and 1 of these was a fatal. You may be familiar. We had a vehicle that came off of the main travel portion of the freeway and hit a car on the shoulder, just north south of us here. That's up 1 fatal collision over the same period as last year, and on par with 2021 for the month in this specific year. Total enforcement contacts for the period 215. Here in and around about the Templeton area, 200 of those are up on the freeway, 15 down on the surface streets around town. That's an increase of 34% over the prior year. Total citations issued are up 27% over the total over this period for the year. 131 issued in April in the Templeton area. 123 of those on the freeway within the area. 8 of those on the county roads. Maximum speed violations, that's just a regular freeway speed, 60 on the freeway, 2 on county roads, 62 for the period. That's up 35% over 2020. To give you an idea of the way that enforcement contacts have trended from our whole region, the CHP Templeton area. In 2020, there were 308. In 2021, there were 892. And for this period, this year, there were 924. So it continues to trend up as we move out of COVID. There were no seatbelt violations written for this period here in the Templeton area. There were 6 DUI arrests. That's an increase over 1 for the prior period. I have mentioned the double fatal that happened just up here on the freeway south of us. That will probably be charged as a homicide. The officers that investigated the crash did a phenomenal job. I've had several conversations with the district attorney's office. There's enough information and statements and evidence to implicate the driver for knowing that he was a threat driving under the influence and continuing this pattern of driving under the influence. And so it resulted in a double fatality, which was very unfortunate. With respect to, any questions on that?
Any questions? Director Giardini, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you.
With respect to collisions in the Las Tablas and Bethel Road area, we had previously done an inquiry, statistics inquiry on that area just several months back. We updated that with a recent collision that happened in March of this year. So, and I will leave these documents with you all. For an 8-year period, 2014 through 2022, specific to the Bethel Road and Las Tablas Road, there was a total of 5 collisions. There were none in 2014, there were none in 2015, there were none in 2016, 1 in 2017, none in 2018, and then there was 1 crash each 2019 through 2022 each year. Now that's specific to Las Tablas and Bethel, that immediate region. As I considered the issue and discussed with my accident investigation officer, the officer who processes all of this data and processes our collision data, we decided to open up our view and look at the Bethel Road corridor in general to see what we had in terms of crashes for that period. So specific to Bethel Road corridor, excluding the Tablas intersection or the larger Tablas area, there was essentially a similar picture. Looking at 2014 through 2022, there was a total of 6 collisions, no more than 1 in any given year, save 2017. So there were no collisions in 2014 or 15, and there was 1 in 16, 2 in 17, 1 in 18, and 1 each in 21 and 22. And one of those, if just confirming that they're different dates at different time, also involves fencing and so forth in April, separate from the collisions that we've had in the Bethel Road and Tablas area, which has involved fencing, non-injury collisions, cars are coming off the roadway and striking fences and so forth in the area. The 2021 crash involved DUI. The 2022 crash does not appear to involve driving under the influence. So that's our statistical data mining, if you will, just submitted for you guys for consideration on what to do in the area. We have increased patrols. I've requested that the camera, the reader board that gives your speed when you're driving by, the speed reader be brought back up here. It's on assignment in the southern end of the division, but we'll get it back up here. We're having some failure in that technology right now. So somebody borrowed ours and we shipped it off to another area. So I'm trying to get it back up here. We'll deploy that out there. Any questions relative to that?
Questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know that you've got one of the reader boards here on Old County.
And yes, some
And
of
that
those,
would be appropriate because of the school, and there seems to be sometimes some speeding along Old County.
correct.
And we've got the schools there.
And sometimes the county roads will set those up. Sometimes Caltrans will set those up, and then we actually possess some of our own. So I'm going to try to deploy the highway patrols equipment in this specific area, and with increased patrols, we're hoping to be able to keep a lid on it. You can see that the enforcement is trending up inside your district. The officers certainly are concerned. They do what they can. A lot of them live here and they wait a long time to come to work here, to get the seniority to be here.
Yeah.
They take a lot of pride in being here. Our staffing levels are a little bit strained, so the combination of strained staffing levels and increased enforcement is really a testament to how hard they're working. We're down a number of officers. We're hoping to recoup those in the coming months with 2 coming in on this next transfer. So we'll be up to, I'm hoping, unless one transfers out.
At what point is it determined that a traffic signal is the solution? Because I would think that some of this is increased traffic flows.
And this is part of the reason we did that kind of broader data analysis, is to see what the conversation might be for controls. That's going to be county roads in this case. And I wanted to understand what my conversation might be with county roads if we were going to do any kind of control at intersections. Ultimately, that's their decision. This seems a little scattershot to me, but I've worked in areas where there's alternate controls. There's not necessarily a light at an intersection or a stop sign or upgraded lanes and that type of thing. Just warning signs, hey, you're coming into a residential area or that type of thing. That's something maybe they could explore at county roads, but that would be County Roads' decision. And if that's something you guys action from your side, let me know if that conversation is going on. I'll be happy to talk to Ms. Nakaradi or what have you. That's why we got the data for that conversation.
Good to know. So, all right, well, thank you for that. Any questions before, yes?
Just a couple comments. One is thank you for being here. Appreciate you being here in person.
Pleasure.
Yeah, we recognize your commitment to this community, your coaching and your reliability reporting to us. So I wanted to thank you for that. And then thank you for the extra work on that Los Tablas Bethel intersection. It doesn't seem like there's any trends to it. It just seemed like there's somewhat isolated cases without any kind of specific traffic increased volume, or I think the issue really is the interchange between isolated rural area where they're going faster and then a residential area.
Right.
So, that probably takes people by surprise, and if there's DUI involved or something, that's where the issue is. But, I wanted to thank you. I just was curious if you found anything, and you went way above and beyond.
It's
so
hard
I
to-
appreciate that.
It's hard to identify any kinds of trends, but I feel as you do, it has to do with moving from a rural area into a somewhat residential area. It is going to be a large number of people coming from out of the area who aren't familiar that changes there because they're coming from the vineyards and whatnot, which implies there can be DUI involved at times too. So these are things that we can explore. And that's how you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, I mean, there is that four-way stop sign there.
Yeah.
That should, slow people down. But I think it's also because it's going from 46 all the way over to Vineyard. It's one way to get from one end to the other. Yeah.
And that's where that's where like a warning option, if you're familiar, I've worked in the North State quite a bit. If you're familiar coming into the Sacramento area on some of the freeways and county roads, there are yellow, just hazard warning signs and a flashing light says entering a residential area. People are just flying in from the county like they've been doing for decades, and there's just been a lot of growth out there. So something like that may be an option, but it is county roads.
Yeah.
I mean, the speed limit a couple of years ago was decreased due to an accident, so now it's supposed to be 40 miles an hour, but I think that's still, people are still, I don't know if they don't see it.
We're battling speed. Yeah, everywhere, especially as traffic counts were so low during COVID, and now it's starting to ramp back up, getting everyone to realize that, and then there's more of them out there, so probabilities say they will crash a little more. So we do see crashes going up. So far, we're keeping the fatals. That's what we always are working towards.
Yeah.
I'll leave those with you.
All right, well, thank you very much. We appreciate the update and the information you provided.
Pleasure. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening. Okay, and we have on Zoom, I think I see Commander Manueli with the Sheriff's Department.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Good evening. Michael Manueli, Commander, Sheriff's North Station, with your report for this month. We will be talking about April 2022. Calls for service to the station, 1,636 calls. Compared to last year, we had 1,674 calls. That is a 2% drop in calls for service. Calls for service for Templeton this year, 339. Compared to last year, 368, a drop of about 8%. San Miguel had approximately 182 calls for service. Looking at those calls for service, breaking them down into specific categories. Assault and battery, 2 calls for service, generating 1 report. Both those calls for service were domestic violence related. We had 24 disturbance calls, generating 2 reports. One of the reports, a subject was throwing rocks at kids and telling them to leave the property. The other call was a subject who had been arrested by the CHP, taken to a medical facility, tore out his IV, and his friend was now on scene causing disturbance. We responded and assisted in keeping that situation from escalating. Thankfully, there were no burglary call for service or reports for this past month. That is a very good statistic. We had 8 calls for service related to thefts, 7 of those generating reports. Again, a purse taken out of an unlocked vehicle. Again, 2 catalytic converters stolen with other material. We had a large amount of cash stolen in 2 separate incidents, one from a residence and another from a vehicle. Don't leave valuables in your vehicle. You hear me say that all the time. Vandalism, we had 2 calls for service, generating 1 report. We had a vandalism at our local high school. There were 4 trespassing calls, none of them generated reports. We had squatters at a property after the owner had passed away. We also had a group of motorcycles crossing the RP's property or the reporting party's property to access the riverbed, and then reports of motorcycles on the railroad tracks. There were no phone scams, calls for service, or reports. We had 8 suspicious circumstances calls, generating 1 report. The caller reported her video camera picked up someone coughing during the night, but no one could be seen. Our deputies responded to take a report. Other notable comments, the Sheriff's Department has initiated its body-worn cameras, and you will see all our patrol deputies now wearing body-worn cameras. Another tremendous and remarkable event, the deputy who was wounded in the Templeton shooting approximately a year and a half ago has returned to work. A very dedicated and determined employee who has worked very hard to return to public service and is now serving the Sheriff's Office and the North County, and he is to be applauded for his bravery, his tenacity, and determination. And that is my report for this month.
Thank you for that. And with that, I'll open it up to the board if the board have questions or comments. Director Giardini?
No comments.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful news to hear about the officer who's returned to work. So I'm happy to hear that. So that's great news. So thank you very much for providing that update this evening and keeping the
Very good. I look
community
forward
safe.
to.
Pardon me?
Very good. I look forward to meeting with you again soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, we'll move to public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public may address the board for items which are not on tonight's agenda. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act upon the items not on tonight's agenda. However, the board or district staff may briefly respond to statements made or questions posed by the public. Additionally, on their own initiative or in response to questions posed by the public, a board or staff member may ask a question for clarification. The board may request staff to report direct back to the body at a subsequent meeting concerning any matter, or take action to direct staff to place a matter of business on a future agenda. So with that, I'll open it up to members of the public if they would like to address the board at this time, and if so, please unmute your phone. Okay, hearing and seeing no member of the public wishing to address the board, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda consists of a number of items. Item A is the minutes of the board's April 19th, 2022 meeting, and this is to consider adoption of those meeting minutes. Item D is the treasurer's report. Consider approving March 2022 treasurer's report. Item C is resolution 06-2022, the weed abatement. Board will consider adopting resolution 06-2022, declaring weeds and debris as a public nuisance. Item D is award the 2022 weed abatement contract, and this is where the board will consider authorizing the general manager to enter into a contract with Hanson Brothers Custom Farming for the 2022 weed abatement. Item E is the budget amendment for Park and Recreations. And this is to increase the revenues and expenses. The board will consider approving a budget amendment for increases of $33,630 in revenue and $38,271 in expenses. Item F is resolution number 07-2022, and this is regarding remote meetings. And this is where the board will consider approving this resolution, making findings to permit the continuation of remote board meetings and committee meetings in compliance with AB 361. And while we prefer having the board all in this room, it is ideal to continue to allow for the remote meetings in the event that any one of us should not be feeling well enough to attend in person. So it gives us that added flexibility. With that, would any members of the board wish to pull any of the items on the consent agenda for discussion? Yes.
I don't want to pull an item. I just want a clarification on the weed abatement, item number 3. That item will come back before us on which date?
June 7th.
June 7th.
So what this, what the resolution does, just to clarify, is it states that you are directing staff to notify these particular property owners that those parcels are out of compliance as of the date of the inspection. And that if they wish to protest that determination, they can come on June 7th. At the June 7th meeting, you can listen to any protests. And if you pass a resolution on that date, that would actually order the destruction and removal of weeds on any parcels of the existing exhibit. I think there are 130 or 132. Of those 132 that remain, and usually we're down considerably, like maybe 25% of that number or less. Let's say there's a dozen or 2 dozen at that point. Those would be then considered for destruction by the district's weed abatement contractor. So we'll do a couple more rounds of inspections between now and then, and the list will continue to dwindle. If, however, you see a parcel that is not on this list, that or we get a complaint or the fire chief notices a parcel that's not on this list, we'll have to, we'd come back to you and start this process over again for any new parcels. So that basically the code requires them to have this this noticing procedure.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, Director Peterson?
Yeah, just another quick question on item C. Why and where is the district violation?
My understanding is that was an error. It's this parcel here.
So yes,
Maybe it's not this parcel.
You're gonna burn down the fire department? Is it?
We're thinking about it, yeah. Actually, that was done in error. And when we were setting up the actual software to do the parcel inspections, which is a GIS mapping system, we clicked this parcel as a test and we couldn't get it to delete without redrawing the map. So we just left it in place.
Okay,
That was it.
I'm just curious.
So I don't know of a weed problem on the parcel, but we'll do a quick walk around before we.
Well, I'm happy to hear that that was by error, that the district was noted as being non-compliant, so thank you. Any other questions? With that, I'm going to open it up to the public. If members of the public have comments or questions on any of the items listed on tonight's consent agenda. And if so, please unmute your phone and address the board. Okay, hearing none, I'll bring it back to the board. And so with not having any of the items to be pulled for further discussion and no further questions, I'd like to make a motion that the board approve items A, B, C, D, E, and F under the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion made by Director Logan, seconded by Director Peterson. May we have a roll call, please?
Directors Logan,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Pardonish,
Aye.
and Giardini.
yes,
Okay, thank you for that. So that motion passes 5-0. We'll move now to our general manager's report.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a few items to update you on. First of all, I guess it's really a nationwide, but the drought monitor update is released each Thursday. And last Thursday, the drought monitor map showed a worsening condition for our area. Essentially, the inland San Luis Obispo County went from severe drought to extreme drought. And so because of that, we have updated our signage that we have, the billboards around the community. And we released a press release yesterday, encouraging residents to do their part and save additional water, and updated that press release to show that the conditions have recently worsened to this, what's known as the D3. So I just wanted to point that out to you. You probably continue to hear more news about drought conditions, and in fact, at least according to that source, the drought monitor map, which I think is fairly widely accepted, the conditions for our area are worsening, and perhaps that was predictable given the very dry rain year that we've had, consecutive rain years that we've had. The initiative that you discussed but ultimately took no action on at your last meeting, recall that was an initiative that was circulating that would have limited the ability of local governments. Should it make the ballot and then be voted in by voters in California, would have limited the ability of a local government to seek revenue enhancements in certain ways, failed to make the ballot. And so the news that was out today was that this group plans on recirculating it in 2024. So there'll be no need for our board to consider that further at this time, taking a position on it. And then finally, just a note, I'll be out of the office late Thursday afternoon and Friday out of town.
All right, thank you for that. Any questions?
I have one question.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, do we know who got the LAFCO position between Deb and Caps? And I forgot who the other position was, or the other person was.
You know, I haven't heard yet, but I don't know if the deadline's come. Let me do a quick, if you give me just a second, let me check and see when that is. The election deadline isn't until June 6th, so we won't know until sometime after that date.
Ah, okay. I was just curious. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the general manager? Okay, I'll open it up to members of the public. If members of the public have questions regarding the general manager's update, you may unmute your phone. Okay, hearing none, we'll move to committee reports. And I believe in your packet, there is a Park and Recreation and Refuge committee report. Do any members of the board have questions or comments regarding the committee report in your packet? Yes, Director English.
I do not have a question on that one. I do have a comment about tag.
Okay. Director Giardini, do you have any comments or questions regarding Park and Recreation Refuge?
I do not, but thanks for asking.
Okay. And then I think Director English, you have a tag update that you would like to provide?
Now, I just want to comment that the tag meeting is this Thursday, and it will be in this meeting, and it will only be in person. They do not have a remote option. And so if somebody from the public wants to attend the tag meeting, they will have to show up in person. So I'm assuming there's been some discussion with district staff about use of our equipment, but that didn't seem to work out for this particular meeting.
So I've had many conversations with Murray Powell over the entire COVID period about options. Ultimately, what I've communicated to Murray and TAG is that they could, and I don't, this is probably not a practical solution, they could hire either the district or Bill Gaines Audio to run our equipment during their meetings. I don't believe they have a source to pay for that. They could, or we would be willing to train a county. TAG is a county, it's created by the county, and it's really to support county planning efforts. And if county planning were to devote an employee to attending TAG, we would be willing to train a county staff member who would be consistent, not a new one every time, in using the equipment, but that I didn't believe that a tag delegate could operate the equipment and participate in the meeting at the same time. And so that's kind of been the end of it. I've told Murray that they could obviously use the local, for presentation power. I know they occasionally have presentations and that kind of thing, and that part's easier to use, and they could do that without having an operator. But to facilitate the Zoom component and the interactive cameras and stuff, that they would need a devoted person. So I don't know if you've received any feedback from TAG on that, or if that's, he hasn't suggested that that's just not gonna work. But it's sort of just been, we really haven't had a meeting go without a hitch yet. We had a committee meeting yesterday where we had technical trouble. I think that they would have trouble perhaps every meeting, and we'd be getting phone calls, and it would, like, I think so far tonight's meetings so far has all worked, but we haven't tried to present anything. This is not it's not difficult to use, but it's also not something that you could just walk in and immediately pick up.
I certainly support the protection of our equipment and the stance that we're taking with that. It just is convenient in my being able to watch the tag meeting from home, but oh well, I'll be here on Thursday.
So is it that TAG is not having Zoom at all? I know that the county has, because with the Water Resource Advisory Committee, they have gone to in-person meetings only for any of the voting delegates, as has the NASI Commission. But they still have Zoom for people who want to participate who are not voting members. So I'm wondering if that's why it's being done here in person.
No, well, I just got the notice, and there was some discussion at the previous meeting about the conversations they're having with us, with TCSD.
Okay.
But I just got the notice this week, and it said no Zoom link for this meeting, so.
Yes, I mean, I could speculate on what the reason we're enabling Zoom meetings for the NASI Commission is it takes place during business hours, and we've committed to Carrie to supporting that, what is usually like a half-hour meeting during our regular hours. And there's county staff members who attend RAC. The county doesn't support these advisory groups in a formal way. They were created by the county, but they're essentially left out on their own. There's no county staff members who attend those meetings regularly. There are county people who occasionally attend TAG, but they don't have a devoted staff liaison. So they're kind of on their own, and they don't have a very significant budget. I mean, I think previously we hadn't let them use like the audio, like the microphones and those kind of things, because there was concerns about, damage and that and whatnot. And it probably wasn't that big a deal, but now we've all become very used to this interactive process. And I think there's a way to do it for TAG, but I didn't want the district to incur direct expenses in supporting TAG further. We already don't charge them for the facility. And if we were to devote an employee here after hours, because their meetings are after business hours, we would be incurring, overtime expense and that kind of thing. Or you'd have me screwing it up.
Yeah. Okay.
That's all my comments. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding any of the committees? Okay, so with that, we'll move to the activity staff reports and updates. We've got in the packet the engineering, finance, fire and emergency services, and park and recreation and solid waste and utilities. Any comments or questions on the engineering report provided by Bettina Mayer? Director Giardini, do you have any comments on the engineering report?
None. I just have only one comment on the finance committee report when you get to that one.
Okay. The next item in here, staff report, is Natalie Clock, the activity report. Any comments or questions regarding that report? Okay. The next one, Director Giardini, do you have a comment or a question on Natalie's report?
No, I only have a comment on the finance committee report. All the other ones I'm good with.
Oh.
That's not in here.
That, I think Director Giardini may be referring to the committee meeting that was held midweek last week, and those minutes were not prepared in time to make this agenda packet, but you could certainly comment on it under the committee report section, which we.
Well, let's leave it for director's reports.
Okay.
So at that section, if you would provide that update when we get to director's reports. Fire and emergency services report. Chief Peterson has a report in here. Any comments or questions from the board? Okay, any comments or questions from members of the public? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We'll move to Park and Recreation and Solid Waste. Melissa Johnson's report. Any comments or questions from members of the board? Members of the public, do you have any comments or questions regarding Melissa Johnson's Park and Recreation status report? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we'll move to utilities. And we have Justin Black's report regarding water conservation comparison, and also these production reports. Any comments or questions from members of the board?
I just had a comment. Well, it's positive and encouraging that our production rate in April was down 25% based on the comparison, which is encouraging. It had been trending up. So I don't know whether or not we had some rain, mild rain, but I think our conservation message may be getting out there, plus the statewide, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I would speculate that the months of January, February, and March were really dry compared to normal, which clearly led to higher water production. And then in late March and then a little bit in April, we did get a little bit more rain, which compared to the prior months was better relative to our historic average. But our production's, it's ramping up more towards a late spring time. I think yesterday's production was 1.6 million gallons. And so we're heading towards that 2 million, plus mark probably in the next month.
We'll see if the public's conservation is working, but I noticed that as well. And I think if we see it trend more flatly, then that would be encouraging, because that would be the message is getting out there.
I'm being hopeful, but I don't know.
I know. Any comments or questions from you, Director Giardini, on Justin Black's utility report?
None from me.
Okay. Members of the public, do you have any comments or questions regarding the utility report? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We'll move to directors' reports and or comments. And this is where directors can give a brief report on any meetings that they might have attended on behalf of the district. So I'll open it up with you, Director Giardini, since you did want to comment on the Finance and Administration meeting.
Oh, thank you. So at the Finance and Administration meeting that Director Peterson and I attended, we did review the fire department budget, and in the fire department budget, there was a request for a truck for our chief. And so he's going to be, if I understand this correctly, replacing an existing truck with a new truck. And so I just asked him recently to bring us pictures and to explain it at the budget hearing, so that we don't make the same mistake that we made with the fire engine, and we understand completely why we need this new vehicle and the differences between what we have existing and what he's purchasing. So I just asked him for clarification on that. And so hopefully he'll provide that. And then the second thing I have to report on is I attended the seminar that was put on by the North County Regional Conservation District and the Department of Water regarding the water situation in the Adelaide area. As you know, the county is studying that. And there was a meeting held in the Atascadero Library a couple weeks ago. And just for general knowledge, the board had given money to study that area. Some study had been done. They felt it wasn't enough, so they're going back in. The Department of Water has, the county has funded the ability to collect samples 4 times a year from 30 different well sites in the Adelaide area. There's over 2,000 wells in the Adelaide area. They're only able to have money to collect samples from 30 of them. So they're going to be possibly setting policy on 1.5% of the wells being tested. So we're trying to encourage wineries or private residences in that area to enroll in having their wells tested because they didn't have 30 people. So if you know anybody that lives out there or connected with any wineries that would, agree to having their wells monitored 4 times a year for collecting data, that would be good. And they're just in the collecting data portion that will be completed in 2 years. And then the board of supervisors at that time will review that information. And that's all.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Any other comments or questions from any of the other board members? Bless you. Okay, just a couple of things. Director Giardini and I met, gosh, was it just yesterday? It was just yesterday. Seems like it was a long time ago. Yesterday, we had a fire and emergency committee meeting where we reviewed the estimate provided by our consultant for some of the needed enhancements to the fire station to accommodate a 24/7 staffing. And unfortunately, that estimate, much to everyone's surprise, was doubled what we were anticipating, and is looking at $5.3 million. And part of that is due to kind of the circumstances of the world with oil prices and gas prices being higher. It's causing higher prices in shipping. Materials are higher, inflation. So, but there's some costs that were not included in that estimate that we've asked the consultant to complete. So we have a comprehensive estimate to include such things as furnishings, any permits, any impact fees, to include all of those. So he is working to finish that up. We also talked about, is there an interim solution? So our general manager kind of had us kind of brainstorm a bit about, because the cost, the price tag to make those enhancements is not likely going to occur anytime in the near future. And so it's, what's the interim solution? Asking Chief Peterson what was giving him the most heartburn. And it's really trying to accommodate the 24/7 staff. And I don't know if any of you have recently been up to the living quarters in the fire station. They are not luxurious by any means. So more to come on that. It was very disappointing, but I think now it's just looking at, is there an interim solution that would be more like a long-term solution? So short of me winning the lottery. So another item that I think the general manager provided a written update, but for the public that's on the phone, General Manager Briltz and myself met a week ago, Saturday, with State Senator Lair. He was in Atascadero for the fire station in Atascadero. The fire department celebrating its 100-year anniversary, and had contacted the general manager to come by and meet with the general manager and myself to really kind of get a better understanding about Templeton being a special district. So it was a good opportunity to share with him some of the challenges we have with our fire department and our revenue sources. And so we had a very good conversation. He had an opportunity to take a tour of the fire department, look at the living quarters, and get a better understanding of how, in many ways, special districts function much like a city, except we don't do the permits, the planning, we don't maintain the roads, we don't provide public safety, but we provide all the other services. But yet we're sometimes, and I would say more times than not, we're not perceived as a city or in needs, having needs, and sometimes we become an afterthought. So it was a good opportunity to get him familiar with Templeton and what our needs are here. So, we asked if there's any opportunities for grants or any other funding from the state that we would hope that he would think of Templeton and our fire department. So it was a good conversation. I think he asked a lot of good questions. He seemed very interested in wanting to understand how we function differently than a city. We talked a little bit about when the board previously had some preliminary discussions about becoming a city and shared with him what those barriers were. So good dialogue there. So that's all I have to report on. Anything else from anyone?
I just want to thank you for meeting with Senator Laird. That's a really important message to pass along, is the disparity between recognition by the state of services districts and municipal agencies. And we get the short shrift every time. And so the more we can
I think it's
get that
educate-
message out there,
Yeah.
the better. And so thank you for doing that.
Yeah, well, I think the general manager did a great job in outlining what, because we kind of focused on two needs and two issues that are statewide: water and fire. And without going into too much more, but the restrictions with our funding, some of the disparity that occurred with COVID relief funding. And I think he appreciated that. And I think he also understood that as well. So it was a good discussion. But the general manager, I have to give him credit. He did the outline and to keep us kind of focused and on track. And also Chief Peterson for providing the tour of the fire station and his staff as well. So I think it was a good meeting. And we met with him probably about an hour in length. So, and hopefully he'll be back by on a regular basis. So that would be great. Okay, with that, we're going to move to closed session, and members of the public who are on the phone, do you have,
a general manager report?
pardon me?
A general manager report?
He's already given his report.
You did?
Yeah,
I must have slipped. Sorry about that.
that's okay. And members of the public, you may have questions or comments on the closed session items, but we will not be making any decisions. This is for the closed session discussion, is for discussion purposes only. The discussion will be, and any decisions will be presented at the June 7th?
Yeah, any announcement that comes out of closed session would be made on June 7th.
June 7th, it is June 7th. It just seems like so far into the month for it being the first Tuesday of the month. So with that, any comments from members of the public who are on the phone before we adjourn into closed session? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Thank you very much for attending tonight's meeting. We appreciate our public's involvement in the meetings. So thank you.
I need a 2-minute break.
Okay, we're going to take just a quick little break before we go into